Now introducing the Minor Wisdom Trio! Minor Wisdom!
Almost to episode 200. Almost there. Inching closer to episode 200. And I don't have plans to do anything after that. Anyway, this week is Paul Davis. Again, one of those people that quite a few people have said, why don't you have him on? Well, here he is. You know, like I can't have everybody on every week. You know what I mean? So got Paul on. He is the head of the theater department at the Kinder High School for the Performing and Visual Arts. My alma mater. Wasn't called that back then. It wasn't called Lakewood Church also back then. So we also had Astroworld back then. So anyway, things change. But Paul is probably, in a fascinating way, one of the most design intelligent people you'll ever meet. And it's effortless. As far as what I've seen from him, the work that I've seen, pictures, and even I've actually seen some of the shows, and the way he kind of just goes about his business, and it's frustratingly effortless because he's just really good and confident at what he does. And I think that translates, or at least has been recognized by a number of people that use his brain. He's one of the few one-act play clinicians that, he can tell you how to maybe direct a show in certain ways and things like that and be better with that, but he's a clinician that is sought after because of his design brain. And that's really cool. And something that I know Mel and I have talked about wanting to do. Mel has started. Nobody wants to call me. But it's a cool thing that some people trust him to talk about their show early on in the process, when most of the time their design work is lackluster. I mean, let's be honest, when you're presenting your show to a clinician in early February, you're presenting with whatever the lights are at the place that's hosting, and they could be all over the place. I mean, let's be really honest. That could be the case with the host school for your actual contest. But anyway, I digress. And so some people are really being vulnerable by saying, hey, Paul, here's our show. Can you help us design it, right? Or at least give us some tips and tricks. So that's really cool. Enjoyed the convo with Paul. So moving on. Quite a few things to talk about. My birthday was last week. I didn't really say anything. I said something at the very end of the last episode with Shirley. But it was a lackluster 41, right? 40. Well, who cares about 41? 40 was big. 40 is where you kind of do everything you got. And then the next time you kind of do things, as my sister would say, is when you're halfway to 50, when you turn 45. Yes, I understand. My birthday was last week. I got this really cool 2-seater with a cooler, like fold-up chair for watching Ava's soccer games. 2-seater so that I can always have a friend. You got a friend. Speaking of you got a friend of me, there's a section in our dance show this week. Our dance show is called Life, with an exclamation point, Life. So when we talk about this show at Cooper, say, hey, when is Life over? When does Life start? When is opening night for Life? And anyway, it's just kind of fun to say that, because that's what it's always called for some reason. I don't understand. But that show was this week, and a really horrible thing happened in the world of design. Our choreographer, the dance teacher who works on the show all year from August till now, she does mostly all of her own costumes. She does have some assistants. She does, most of the choreography. She has an after-school program that she gets paid on the side for at the school, but I digress about that. That also performs in this show. So they are students from the school, but it's not a program that's actually in the school. or classes. It's a side thing, side hustle that she uses the school for, which I don't agree with because we're not allowed to do that. But again, I would only say that because I'm leaving. But anyway, they do silks and aerials and things like that and Lyra. And she puts video throughout the entirety of the show that projects on the back bounce. It's not a cyc, it's a bounce. And not a very good projector, not a high quality video, but it's video nonetheless. And the video creator, the content creator, backed out Monday, Tech Week Monday, and said, I'm not doing it, right? A whole like 9 months to prep this thing. And Tech Week, this guy backs out. So clearly that person, bridge equal burned, right? So as the choreographer, as the dance teacher is explaining to me, not without the intention of asking me to do it, but kind of explaining to me like what her vision was on certain sections of the dance, of the whole dance, I started thinking, I could do this. It's not that difficult to do. I know what I'm doing when it comes to some of this editing software and layering and movement and speed and, manipulating with filters and things like that. So I said, I'll do it. So 4 days later, it opened up yesterday as I record this. It opened up Friday, and there were still some issues with the video, but they were pretty good. There were 7 sections in the show. I did video for 6, and I decided I'm going to just use the psych for one because I just couldn't get a grasp of what it is she wanted. And so the rest of it turned out fine, but that was just kind of crappy for that person to back out. Also, this week was a whirlwind. Monday, Joshua Hearson came and did his long day interview at the school and was offered the job a couple days later, announced yesterday, told his kids yesterday as I record this at Seven Lakes. And so Joshua Hearson is coming in to take my job. Now, I don't have a great reputation with people that have taken over for me at a school that I have left. Not so good, except for, I would say, Rowlett. And Morton Ranch. Troy took over at Morton Ranch. I forgot about that. He was great. But after my time with Straight No Chaser, when I left Dulles, not so good. When I left Travis, not so good. But here we are, leaving Cooper. Hopefully things are great. I have no doubts that Joshua Hearson is going to not only do a great job, but do a better job than I could ever do. His kids at Seven Lakes left that school much better technicians than they walked in. And that's all you can ask for, a bunch better people. So Josh is taking over there, which leads me into the whole teacher appreciation thing. That was this week. The teacher appreciation thing was popular on Facebook, right? A lot of people posting all about their, leave me a message, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of did it in a bass-ackwards way. But I want to read this one thing. I won't name the student, but I got this privately. And I just thought this was cool. And this isn't just applicable to me. And again, I'm going to spend a little time on this. The student said, "You taught me a ton, but one thing in particular stands out the most. I've always doubted myself. There's still so many instances when I do, because I overthink. I have imposter syndrome, all the classic self-esteem issues. I remember when I got cast in the show, I questioned every single day why I even got that part, excuse me. I felt so underqualified, undeserving, and just bad. You pulled me aside one day and told me I got the role because I was the best fit for that role and that I deserved to be proud and confident in that role. It changed everything for me. I even tell myself that in my job at least once a week. Now that I am an executive, I get imposter syndrome all the time, but I always think back to the conversation we had and I tell myself, I got this job because I'm the best person for this job and I should be proud and confident in that role. I can't tell you how much that helps me still to this day." That meant the world to me, especially coming from that particular student. I had a great relationship with that student, but just, and I still do. But it was just kind of neat to get that, right? And teachers always talk about how much our students mean to us, even more so than we mean to them. And I think that's very, I know that's true, actually. I don't think it's true. But it's nice to hear that stuff every once in a while, to know that you meant something to at least someone. I spent 13 years in the classroom. This is my last year, at least for a while, a long while. But I spent 13 years in the classroom, and I got, a handful of messages from students, former students, and that's all I need. I don't need every single student to be affected. I just need a handful that show their appreciation and understand once they become adults, like what it is that we do, right? Because they sure as hell don't really understand while they're in the classroom. So yeah, I appreciate you, teachers. And finally, in Drowsy Chaperone, rehearsals continued this past week. I got spit on. If you know Drowsy Chaperone, you know what part I am. We practiced the spitting scene multiple times, and then my counterpart told me that they were sick the next day. So anyway, I'm fine. I've got the immune system of an ox. Enjoy this interview from Paul Davis. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Leave a review, 5 stars, whatever it is. I get the feeling not a lot of people listen to my intros and just scrub forward. But if you are listening, hey man, leave a review. Thanks, Bobby.
I didn't take theater until my senior year of high school. And I went to a really small, rural community, Liberty, Texas. I didn't do any theater. Basically, in 7th grade or 6th grade, my parents were like, you have to either join the football team or you have to join 4-H. So I did 4-H. And then my senior year, I had some extra classes I could take. So my mom had suggested that I would probably like theater. So I took it. And then I guess, like they say, the rest is history. But all during high school, I did take art classes. So I've always been really drawn to art and the arts. So I think that as I got into theater, design was a kind of a natural fit. Then I went to undergrad at Stephen F. Austin, and I was not a theater major. I was a history major. And then I took a theater class and I loved it. And then I ended up eventually becoming a theater major and an art minor. So, but that's one thing I love about history. Art theater is history, and I'm able to explore these different genres and time periods, which I think is really interesting. And then I did a year abroad there. So I was able to study at Rose Beaufort College in London. And there I did an emphasis in scenic design. So that's kind of where I really got, involved in being a scenic designer. Right. And then I came back. I went to USITT. I went to Unifieds to audition for colleges. And then I wanted to go to Northwestern, and they said, take a year and go work and then come back. So I took a year and I worked at Portland Stage up in Maine. And then I worked at the Dallas Theater Center as a scenic artist. And then I went back, and then I still didn't get in. They called back 8 people and they took 6, and they weren't me. But the University of Connecticut was there, and I met with them, and then I ended up getting, full tuition waiver to go to school basically for free. So then I went up to UConn and did a year there. And then my mom got ill, so I came back to Texas. But I did fly back, and I was designing Angels in America, and I flew back up there and did the tech week and did the show and everything. And then my mom's sickness just got worse, so I came back. And then I ended up losing my mom, and then I was just really kind of I didn't feel like going back to Connecticut where my friends who were there were graduating. So I started teaching. And then that's when I got the job in Leander and started teaching there. And then I taught there for 13 years. Yeah. So with Linda Major. And we had a great program. And then I ended up, eventually moving to the Houston area and getting the job at HSPBA. But in Austin, I did great thing about living in Austin and teaching in Leander is there's such a huge theater scene. You're able to do so much freelance work. So I was able to work with Ken Webster's company, Hyde Park Theater. I kind of became the resident designer. I did a ton of work there. I did a ton of work for Mark McHale's company, Capital T Theater. And then I worked at Zilker Park. So I got to do that musical, I think 5 or 6 times. And then during that time also, I've got to know Luis, and I designed the Allstate production, the scenic designer of that twice. So I did Our Town and Quorum Boy. So yeah, that's kind of, and then now I've been at PVA 12 years, I think,
Wow.
which is kind of crazy.
12. I didn't realize it was 12 years.
Yeah,
That's
it happened. It went fast, or
Yeah.
it's going fast.
Yeah, so we'll get into the PVA thing. The history major thing. So I got a history minor, and this is really, I don't know if this is a question or not, but I can definitely vouch for the importance of that sort of education and background, kind of married with theater, obviously. But so if I get this right, you switched from being a history major to being a theater major. How deep into that did you switch?
Not very deep.
Okay.
After like Western Civilization 2,
Okay.
I was like,
Okay.
maybe I'll do theater. And then I was a theater major and history minor
Yeah.
for a while, and then I ended up being theater and art. So
Okay. All right, that makes more sense.
which was a great fit for me. I mean, I love visual arts as well.
What's your favorite medium?
Paint. I mean, I
Okay.
guess I'm a training as a scenic artist,
Yeah.
so paint. And then I also use when I was at the University of Connecticut, we had this amazing student. She was from Serbia, and she did all this amazing collaging. So I've always taught my students kind of those techniques. They're really freeing, especially if you feel like you can't draw or
Right.
you can't communicate. It's easy to collage, and that's something that I guess now we have Photoshop and stuff, but I'm still old school. I still have like 6 tubs of magazines like in my
Yeah.
design classroom, and we use all that stuff. So
What are your thoughts on Pinterest?
I have a Pinterest
Okay.
account,
All
and I
right.
have multiple followers. And I like Pinterest, but I use it more just for myself, like
Okay.
interior design and
'Cause
gardening.
Yeah, because one of the things that when I was at Dulles, one of the things we did was everybody joined when you were in a show a Pinterest account,
Right.
especially the designers and sometimes the actors too. But it just kept everybody kind of in line with the overall picture.
Vision.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that's why I asked. That wasn't some random, what
Oh,
about
yeah. I
what
think
about
it's a great
Snapchat?
tool.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a great tool, and my students do use it, but I wouldn't say as much as we did at one time. So
Right. And the Yukon thing. So I'm sure I've been told that you went to Yukon at some point in my life knowing you, but I guess I never knew that they have a theater school. It's not something that
yeah.
down here I guess they just don't venture down to like the thespian world as much. I'm sure they have at one point or another, but they're not the
I don't think they really do, just
Yeah.
because you're close to New York, and I think that they have a lot of students that were from that kind of New England area, and then there were actually a lot of students from Canada in my master's program. A lot of students who were from Quebec and
Okay.
Quebec City, so which is not really very far from Stores.
Right.
So yeah, but then there were students from all over. I had international students there from Taiwan, and then the students who were from Serbia. So, and Laura Crow is the costume design teacher there, and she's amazing and has done all this stuff with like Circle and the Square, and she does all this international stuff and textiles,
Right.
And got me interested in going to the Prague Quadrennial, which I did, and so she is a big influence. I had when I was the chair of TTA Design Fest. We brought her in one year to Houston.
Okay. To
She's
to
amazing.
adjudicate that stuff. Yeah.
Well, just to like her work was on display.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know sometimes they'll bring in college designer or professional designers and college level designers to kind of grade it, be the adjudicators for that stuff. So,
But she knew Ming Cho Lee, and she would have like opportunities for the University of Connecticut students to go down and meet with him in his apartment and look at their portfolios and design work. So it was a really cool
Yeah,
experience.
that is kind of that connection. I guess I just didn't think about UConn being a hub for some of that stuff. So, but it makes sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Um, was PVA your introduction to Houston?
Oh no, because
Okay.
I grew up in Liberty, which was near, Houston. We used to drive in my senior year. I know we drove in and saw like Les Mis at Jones Hall
Oh,
and
okay.
stuff. So it's not a far drive. So we would drive in and occasionally see stuff or go to the rodeo or things
Okay.
like that.
I guess
So no, I grew up in the, I would say, greater Houston area, even though it was pretty East Texas.
okay. I guess I don't know enough about Liberty, Texas to have known that it
It's
was
between, yeah, it's between Houston and Beaumont.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Uh do, that reminds me. Do we know do you know people from Beaumont? I feel like
Oh
I've
yeah.
heard this
Well,
before
my
too.
partner is from like that Beaumont area.
Okay, well we'll talk after this cuz I think we have mutual friends that are that because I feel like anyway, we'll talk after this. It's not podcast worthy, but so what is this is again I do this podcast very selfishly to get to know people the way I want to get to know them, not necessarily I don't if I sold podcasts or tried to make money off of this, I would guess I would be have questions that were canned. But I want to know like what's a challenge to Paul Davis? Like what is a scenic or not a scenic a show that is something that you have either done that's challenging or haven't done yet because you know that it's just kind of over the top.
I would say there's nothing that I don't I'm not fearful. Well, maybe like Starlight Express, I guess, because that would be insane to do that. But I'm not fearful of anything. I mean, in Leander, we did Beauty and the Beast, and I would say that was a big show to do with one tech
Right.
director because and then I have to do everything extra. Like I can't have like a backdrop for the tavern. Like I have to have a tavern
Right.
built. So that show was huge. And then all the kind of special effects and stuff like that, and then the costumes. So that was a lot of work.
Okay.
But I'm not really intimidated. I mean, in all honesty, now I don't really design a whole lot
Yeah.
anymore. I'm more of a mentor, and my students are really doing the work now. I did design Mamma Mia this fall at PBA
Right.
because the dance teacher was directing it, and she was really nervous about this her first musical direct since she had been like in college and she'd done musical theater, and she really wanted a support staff of faculty
Yeah.
to support her. So I did that, but really mostly it's my students who are designing now, and I'm just more there to guide them
Right.
and
So
help them find their voice.
so mentally how is that for you going from having almost full control, and not that you don't have control now, but it was a different type of control, right? Where you were the only the only tech director, not the only director, but the only tech director there to being somebody that goes to a space and I can speak on it twofold, being that I'm a former student, but also now that I'm in a situation where I too have like professionals assisting me with all my shows. How was that for you to kind of like be able to let go a little bit? And then also the second part of that is PVA is a school that the students do everything or are expected to do everything, and like you said, with mentors as their kind of their guide. That also had to be quite the shift. So kind of speak on that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, originally, when I left Leander, I was hired there to, teach design. And I think that was something that maybe the school, when I entered it, kind of needed. Was a design teacher. The previous teacher, I think, was doing a great job, but he was more like stage management. So there was more about stage management, not really about scenic design. And ironically, I was designing the Sound of Music that summer at Zilker Park, and one of the TDs, she was like, "Oh well, I'm leaving to Houston tomorrow because I have an interview." And I was like, "Oh well, I do too." And we were both interviewing for the same job, and they ended up hiring both of us because they liked it so much. But those first couple of years I did design there, I kind of wanted to create like, these are the expectations, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything I can't do or won't do. And I just thought it was important to have all the drafting there and the research and the models and do all that, just really like a professional gig, just to model that behavior. And what I found is, after I did that, then the students were able to meet it, like really quickly. Actually, I would say within the next year, students were doing amazing work. But it's kind of like, I felt like in Leander with Linda and I, it was a lot of our vision and, what I thought the world of play looked like, and historical research, and what I was trying to create. And for lack of like a better word, now I feel like I'm have to do kind of, like, there was like an ego check period where I had to say, I had to allow my students to fail in a way. Like, I had to I had to think, I don't know if this is going to be successful. And I would be honest, and I would be like, I don't know if this is going to be successful. And they're like, no, I want to do it. And then I'm like, okay. So I have to let them do it. And then a lot of times they're like, you were right. Or it was, or maybe sometimes it is successful. Because I was designing Big Love, and I had this student who was like, I want to build this whole chandelier out of champagne glasses. And I was like, are you sure? And then she did it, and it was amazing. So I had to trust them, and really also they become, they're your collaborators. So you're really working with them as fellow designers. So you have to trust them.
A little tech tip this week. I didn't do one last week because I don't know why I didn't do one last week, but just a tip for the tech tip, the tip of the tech. This week I figured out that when you have a Lightboard operator that's a student, that creating macros in your Lightboard is probably the best thing to do when you're trying to explain to them, hey, make sure, since I won't be here, take these steps in order to make sure that the lights are on and operating and functioning and lamped on and everything. So I just created macros. I taught the student how to do that, but doing that and then doing it right and wrong are very easy to screw up. It's super easy. It's a slim margin, but macros are the way to go if you need to teach your students how to that they need to do something every single show. You click a button and boom, it's done. But you got to create that macro, and it can be frustrating bro. I remember my senior year when I was there. Obviously, it's been many years in different regimes, but we did the Tempest, and it was our kind of like student design, completely student designed, and it was 3 circular raked stages, all at different rakes and levels. And Stephen Wolf said, "That's if you're going to do that, you guys have to do the math. Like, I'm not going to sit here and do that with you."
Right.
So it took quite some time to get it right, but it ended up being great. But I digress. I have to ask you, I don't ever really dive into this kind of stuff with my interviewees on here, my guests. But again, selfishly, I've got to ask you because I fancy myself a lighting designer first and then a halfway decent scenic designer. What is kind of your process? Like, what do you, and maybe it's not the same thing every time, but what do you find comfort in as steps in your process?
Well, I get the gig, and then I just read the play.
Negotiate your salary. Yeah.
Right. Read the play and really meet with the director, and then just talk with them. I like to have usually an initial meeting where it's more in a relaxed environment, where I don't have like my research or anything, because I don't want to start that journey yet. Usually I have like a sketchbook and a piece of paper, and we just start kind of talking about the space. And then after that communication, and we get kind of like we're on the same page, then obviously research, history, looking at dramaturgy, the world of play. I'm a very, I tend to work with rendering. So I do a ton of renderings. Like, I'll do, like, I don't know, like 5 to 10 different versions of a drawing of the set, that are pretty detailed. And then from there, we have communication. We look at it. We decide what we like, what we don't like. Um, because sometimes I get married to ideas that I have to trash, which is something that I have to teach my students, which I think is the hugest lesson there is for a young designer, is to be willing to throw out those brilliant ideas and get rid of them, even because they're not working. And then from there, I move into doing usually storyboards, and then finally I do a model. But I do prefer rendering. It's just so much
Right.
easier for me. But rendering, you can lie. You can lie about what it really looks. You can make a drawing fit into a space, but then my dryer went off. But then a model doesn't lie.
Right.
So when we were at UConn, we had to do all models. My teacher, Tim Satternow, was from Yale, and so that's all they did were models. So we had to do these tiny 1/8-inch scale models, and we had to make like 6 of them with different scenic design. Like we did Arcadia, we had to make like 6 different 1/8-inch scale models. So that was the way we worked, and which makes sense. If you're in New York, you can like take the model on the train with you because it'll fit in a shoebox or whatever. Um, but yeah, but from my I think background as a scenic artist and just as a visual artist, I'm drawn to sketching and rendering. But like when I was in Leander, I would usually have like one of those spirals sketchbooks, and I would fill the whole book up because I still have some with just research and drawings,
Okay.
like one whole book for a show.
Wow. Yeah, you're better than me. The
But I'm not really doing that now
yeah,
because now
it's the kids.
the kids are and the students are doing it. So because we're doing, gosh, 5 shows right now, and they're all student designed.
Yeah. Yeah,
Lighting, costume set, all of it. So
there is and for like Booker T in Dallas, PVA here, I feel like there's something in San Antonio that's a performing. You would be able to speak on that more, but there's a part of me that wants like all directors at some point within a span of time to be able to go witness, and theater teachers, not, and even performing arts and visual, to go witness what happens at these schools. Not to say that you have to replicate them, but to know that there are students with the capability to learn this stuff, and to be able to trust your students. One of the struggles I had the most, and you're in reverse, but one of the struggles I had the most with when I started teaching was I was a PVA grad, and I wanted my classroom to be just like it was at HSPVA, and I had to very quickly let that go,
right.
because it wasn't the same. So that's why I kind of speak on that whole like, but we were still students. We were still 17-year-old punks, that thought we knew everything and were invincible, and we weren't any different than a student at another school. So anyway, good.
Yeah, it was kind of the opposite for me because when I would teach at, I would say, a traditional school,
Yeah.
I had to be super structured. Like every day when we went in, because I would have like 5 tech theater classes, and I would just have to make sure like every day that I knew exactly what everyone was doing, and then when they were done, what they were doing next.
Right.
Which to me now sounds like I can't believe I used to do that, but I did because otherwise it would be chaos, and I wouldn't get anything done. And I was able to, do what I did. I think just because of structure. And then when I came to PVA, I had to do the opposite.
Yeah.
I had to like trust them that they can do it, and then I'm like, oh, you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing.
How often do you? Because I know you're about to go see a show, even though this will be weeks later after you've seen it. But how often do you go see a show and just watch the show and just enjoy it and not try to look
Never.
at? Yeah. Okay.
Never. I'm always like, you know, I mean, honestly, I mean, I love theater and I love dance too, but I think when I go to the theater, a lot of time I'm looking for production design. Like I really like want to
Yeah.
see like, and I want to see the world of the play. I want to see it created. Like I just saw Moulin Rouge last week, and it was just fun seeing the production design.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Have you ever been fooled by a beautiful production and not so great of a show, and you do not need to give titles or places?
I wouldn't even say fooled because I still would be like, oh, that was beautiful.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
yeah.
So
So yeah,
lipstick on a pig is what I'm trying to say. Like, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, even at the same time, I can like, you know, I still enjoyed it
Yeah.
because I'm kind of coming at it from a different point of view, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
But
And
then but then that doesn't mean that I can't see a show that's very minimalistic and not think it's stunning
right.
because that's happened before. With dance, it's a lot of time it's just light. So, which is great.
And I've got to ask. I always have to ask one act play questions. How do you think now, being that you haven't competed in, uh, 13 years, how do you think now you would approach a one act play?
Um, well, I think how I used to approach it was I try to control everything. I mean, that sounds negative or like I try
Well,
to control all my controllables. So like every detail, like the petticoat on the dress, like I was like kind of insane
yeah,
with the details. Like I would take, you know, we did a show where that took place in like a painter studio, and I took all these cups and put liquid nail in them and stuck all these paintbrushes in them. So like I knew that nothing would ever fall out, and now that I'm judging and kind of on this side, it's really like, oh, it's the storytelling.
yeah,
It's really like, are you telling the story? And if it's beautiful, then yeah, that's amazing. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
it's story.
yeah,
But I will say I do want to go on that journey, and I do think it's about that's the great thing about the theater is, and I always loved doing my shows with a closed curtain, because I always wanted the audience to be sitting there, and then when the curtain opened, I wanted some kind of kinesthetic response from the audience that they were in a different world.
right.
And that's one of the most fascinating things about set design when I go and see shows. I like to look through when the doors open, like what is the world that's beyond um, what I'm seeing on stage. To me, that's what's fascinating.
So what is something that would still, with the one act play world, is there something that you could still get excited about scenically, not storytelling, but like, is there something that you haven't seen yet? That's a weird question because obviously you don't know what you don't know. But I mean, like, is there something? I see shows. I just saw six today, right? That all had different looks. They were all beautiful in their own way. At least that's what I used to tell girls in college that liked me. You're just, but it is, but nothing really nothing is like, oh man, that's really interesting the way they did that, because there are limitations, right? Is there a way to do
I
that
mean,
miss
I think it's kind of a different
genre?
genre now
Yeah.
because there's so much projections and stuff
Yeah.
like that now that really weren't. I mean, when I was doing like we did like Picasso at the Lampina Gil, and we had a
For one
GoPro.
act?
Yeah,
Oh,
and we had like a GoPro. Though it was the one that has the slide in it, and the
yeah.
one light comes up in the other. So this was like a Fresnel or whatever with a GoPro. So it's kind of a different thing now. I mean, it's kind of when I see stuff, I'm like, that's amazing, and it's intimidating a little
Right.
bit, I would say. Um, and that's kind of what's happening in theater too, though.
Yeah.
It's all and it's much more like affordable, really, for theater companies to do that kind of imagery instead of building a whole set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I really answered your
No, that
question,
well,
but
you led me to the next thing, which is projections. Like, have you personally? I know you've used projections in scenic design, but have you personally gone into designing your own images, or are you? Yeah, you're leaving it up to
yeah,
others.
no, I mean, I have my students do it, and they're
Yeah.
wonderful. I mean, the ironic thing when I was in grad school, like I did do all, and this was back when there weren't. Um, I had all this like imagery and words and stuff when I was doing Angels in America, but it was literally like different slide projectors. I
Wow.
think we had like six of them in the back, and they created the image because that's how you had to do it back
Yeah.
then. But yeah, no, not really. No, mainly the students are doing it
Do,
now.
Do you think there's something more artistic to that way, to figuring out how to get six different images to line up, and where you cut them and where you overlap, that kind of thing? Or
It's just different. I think,
okay,
I think it's the difference between doing collage, um, with a magazine and scissors and paper and
right,
glue, and then doing a Photoshop. For
right,
me, I like old school, so I'm,
okay,
and my students, whenever we're doing it, they're very like, I don't know. I think it's really interesting. I get like a really um, interesting response for them just kind of working with tools in their hands and
right,
cutting things out and gluing things. And the other thing, when you're using kind of magazines and things like that, you're finding imagery that everyone is not going to find when they do their first Google search or what have you.
right,
They're going to be finding imagery that other people um, you know don't have access to or aren't aware of.
right. What besides that chandelier, I'm now curious about what is something that a student has done that you were just like completely awestruck by, and it could be that chandelier, but um, what is something that a student has designed or crafted that really kind of blew your mind?
Well, I mean, speaking of projections, we did, and this is like really recent. This was last year. We did Sweeney Todd, but the lighting designer, who's now at Northwestern, which I didn't get into, is the beginning. We had a giant kabuki drop in front of the whole set, and when that beginning music started, there's a whole thing of the Thames of the river, and then it filled with blood, and this kind of topographic map, and then when the horns went, the whole kabuki
Yeah,
dropped, and the whole chorus, and everyone was behind it. I thought that was a really beautiful image, and he came up with all that. That was you know his idea, which we were able to manifest because Dana knows folks that
yeah,
had a kabuki drop that we could use, like all the engineering stuff. That, but then there's a lot of stuff throughout the years that I've just been like, really good work, really
yeah.
strong work.
So actually, I think we're okay to wrap up soon, even though we're that 40-minute clock, because I've gotten a lot out of you, Paul, in 30 minutes, which is great. I like the Q&A thing. So I'm going to wrap up with this question. Since you kind of had a late start to theater relative to a lot of other theater teachers and educators, what is something now that you would go back and tell maybe 12 or 13-year-old Paul why to do theater? Like, what is it about theater that you would tell the younger version of you to start early?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is, obviously I get to be creative and I get to kind of research and, explore these worlds, but also really it was my clan, it was like my people. So it was like who I needed to find when I went to college. And I have friends from undergrad that in Nacogdoches that are doing amazing things still, like right now, that are like really great film actors that have became, they've become like, um, you know, great theater teachers at universities and colleges. So I think there was a unique group of people there. So I think it was really about kind of finding that group of people where I felt, and the thing about theater and college is you don't really need a fraternity or anything like that because you are always there and you are always working and you are always busy. So I think that's something that was important, but I think it just happened when it needed to happen. I think allowing me to do all these other things kind of when I was young kind of informed who I am as an artist.
Right. So then don't do theater.
Well, I just find it ironic that some of my students are like, I just don't know if I want to do theater and call. And
Yeah.
I'm like, when I was your age, I hadn't even taken theater
Yeah.
class yet. So
That's
I'm
fair.
like, be open to the possibilities of whatever. And you don't have to do theater. We have some students who've gone on and done, medical school and gone
Yeah.
to Rice and all kinds of stuff. And still, one of them was like, and they couldn't figure out how to glue this together. And he was like, have you used liquid nail? And they're like, what's that? And so, I'm like, see, you're learning skills that you can use. in your bioengineering class at Rice.
Minor wisdom.